Good evening. This is Ryan again with Making HM1 in 2021. That might catch on, might not for the tagline. We'll find out. Today I'm going to be going over BUMED instruction 6280.1c. Basically, we're going to be talking about medical waste. The big ones that I've seen in this instruction through studying is like what are the 9 different classifications, who reports to who, what are the training requirements, some small stuff like that. What are the different types of regulated medical waste? But we'll go through it little by little. So again, BUMED instruction 6280.1c. On page 1, it defines what regulated medical waste is, but definitions get explained later in the enclosure, so not too important right now. It also says that anyone who conducts business outside of the United States for the RMW stuff, they need to fall under the host nation's final governing standards, or FGS is the acronym. If there's not an FGS, you go under the Overseas Environmental Baseline Guidance Document, the OEBGD. So the OEBGD, from what I'm reading it, is basically like the in general, this is what we do. But the FGS is if like a certain country says, yes, this is how we dispose of it, that's how you are also going to dispose of it, because you're following the host nation's RMW guidelines. Like, we're not trying to trash the, that's not good to put a bunch of dirty needles in somewhere that a host nation doesn't like them. That could cause some international stuff. So that's really it for the first page. Moving on to page 2, talks about the scope. It applies to all BUMED BSO 18 facilities. So again, I covered BSO 18 a little bit in a previous video. That is just Navy medicine MTFs or DTFs. Navy medicine stuff. Everything I've ever seen referenced to Navy medicine is BSO 18. However, it also applies to Army veterinary facilities aboard Navy shore installations per the established MOU between BUMED and the United States Surgeon General. So basically, all Navy and all veterinary clinics that are on Navy bases have to follow this. For Marine Corps, it's spearheaded by the medical officer of the Marine Corps. Seeing as there's a lot of Navy operational Marine Corps questions, I would say it's probably important to know. So it's the medical officer of the Marine Corps that provides separate guidance to Marine Corps activities. And there are also 9 groups of RMW. It's categorized by what they look like. And I have a fun acronym for that. You guys are going to get a snapshot of how my mind works in a little bit. Let's see, I got this one on paper too, so mind the flipping. So first I'm going to read off the 9 groups, and then I'm going to tell you how my mind helps memorize those. I'm not the best at making acronyms, but for me, this at least makes it so I can narrow it down to like a 50-50 shot or a 75% sure it's this one. So the 9 groups are Group 1, culture, stocks, and vaccine. Group 2, pathological waste. Group 3, blood and blood products. Group 4, used sharps. Group 5, animal waste. Group 6, isolation waste. Group 7, unused sharps. Group 8, other. And Group 9, chemotherapy. So here's how my mind works. When I think of number 1, I think, yeah, I'm number 1. I'm super classy. So I have the most culture. So number 1 is culture, stocks, and vaccines. Number 2, so group 2, pathological. I think 2 path, kind of sounds like Tupac. So 2, pathological waste, Tupac. Number 3, blood and blood products. Don't really have a good one for that one. I guess there's 2, oh, there we go. There's 2 O's in blood. There's 2 vowels in 3. So blood 3. 4, used sharps. I think of used and unused sharps together as 47. How my mind remembers the 47, I couldn't begin to tell you. But I think used and unused, 4, 7. The dirty stuff is first, then the clean stuff. Group 5, animal waste. When I was a kid, it was one of the Smash Mouth albums. All Star was song number 5. I really loved that album. So when I hear that, I go beast mode, animal. So number 5 is animal waste. Number 6, isolation waste. This is where my mind goes kind of weird with this one. So isolation 6, I think of an isosceles triangle. and I think of Isixoleces, so isolation 6. As I said earlier with the 47 unused sharps. Group 8 other, I think the Donner Party ate each other. So 8 each other. So 8 other. 9 chemo. When I think of chemo, I think of really old people. So I think of the last one in the group. So 9 is old, 9 chemo. From the top, number 1 culture, 2 path, 3 blood, 47 used sharps and unused sharps, 5 I'm the beast, so that's animal waste, 6 Isixolation waste, 8 other, so they ate each other, and number 9 old, they need chemo. So I'm gonna look through some of the things that the for each category that the instruction has specifiers for. So for example, animal waste is not necessarily all animals are animal waste. It's specific to infectious animal waste. So the difference between a dead bird and like the dead bird with the bird flu. Remember a few years back when any dead bird on the ground was terrifying and you had to run away? So that would be an infectious animal. So think of nasty bird flu. And anything that, so any animals that are exposed to gross stuff, so lab rats, bio stuff. Next one is biosafety level, which not sure how exactly this relates in the animal, but here we go. So BSL, I know that one as I remember the only BSL-4 lab in China is Wuhan and Corona. Well, I'm not going to throw any conspiracy theories there, but I think of that as an easy way for me to remember which one's the deadliest. Number 4. So the instruction really only identifies which is the most stringent controlled BSL, the most deadly, and that is BSL 4. So 4 is the worst, 1 not so bad. Blood products, pretty obvious definition, same with culture and stocks. Dual waste is any waste that is both an RMW and a hazardous waste. Isolation waste is any bedding from patients or animals in a BSL-4 area. So not just any isolation whatsoever, specifically isolation in a BSL-4 lab. So the gross stuff where if it gets on something, it could cause a lot of harm. Then non-regulated medical waste is defined as any waste generated in healthcare that is non-infectious and requires no additional treatment before disposal. So basically stuff you would throw away. The examples that the instruction gives: diapers, facial tissues, sanitary napkins, very small amounts of blood. So like wipe up, like doing a minor procedure, wipe up with a 4x4 and throw it away. Stuff like that. Pathological waste, anything from the body. So think tissue. It does say that wastes are not considered pathological waste if they've been fixed in formaldehyde, and those ones should be disposed of per state, local, or final governing standard regulation. And the textbook definition of regulated medical waste is any waste generated that is capable of causing disease or would pose other adverse health risks to individuals or the community if improperly handled. So anything that could cause a health issue if it gets out. So anything dirty, gross, nasty, don't cause the next COVID. Sharps, anything that is sharp. One thing that I thought was really interesting, which I didn't notice on like the past few reads of this instruction, it specifically says syringes even if there's not a needle attached. So all syringes, all needles, regardless of if the syringe was ever attached to a needle, according to this, it should always be thrown into a sharps container. Chemotherapy trace waste, so anything related to chemo. There is a number in this one, so remember that. Waste is classified as empty if there is less than 3% of its full capacity remaining. So for chemo stuff, just think 3% and under, that is considered empty. And that's really it for like the definition. So now I'm going to go over some of the roles and responsibilities in BUMED instruction 6280.1 Charlie. So chief of BUMED, it's a BUMED instruction, so he is the boss, or he or she is the boss. So their job is to formulate and disseminate Navy medicine policy, and they also coordinate policy roles, anything from DHA, CNO on up. Commanders of Navy Medicine Echelon 3 activities. I still need to review the organizational standard. Off the top of my head, I am 90% sure that Echelon 3 is the region and Echelon 4 is the standard MTF. I'll have to look that up. I actually might do that next because it's going to bother me. But as of now, Echelon 3, I'm like 90% sure is your NavMed West, NavMed East, and Navy Medical Logistics NavMed.com. Either way, it's a third one that's not East or West. I'll put more info on that when we do that video. So the CO's job, so CO and MTF, their job is to make sure that they're complying with the regulations. No one wants to be the CO of the people that are dumping waste where it shouldn't go. They need to make sure there's an environmental program manager who is EMS appropriate, and they're able to take care of stuff. The EPM is the person that provides the day-to-day management of the RMW program. They also oversee subordinate commands. So for the EPM, they must take environmental training, unless previously trained, or at least within 1 year of appointment. So they got a surprising amount of time to get trained for what they're doing, but it needs to be within a year. Let's see. The next step down from the EPM is the EPOC. Their job is to provide overall management of RMW program for the site. How I'm reading the difference between the EPM and the EPOC is the EPM is like the higher level program manager, and the EPOC is more of the person that's in the front lines dealing with the RMW stuff. So their job is to provide the overall management of the program for a specific site. They need training within 1 year, and they also need an annual refresher. Oh, actually, the EPM is also supposed to have annual refresher. So EPM, EPOC, 1 year refresher training, as well as within 1 year of getting it. So just remember, 1 year, 1 year. And the EPOC's job is also to make sure that anyone that touches RMW is trained and qualified and able to mess with it. It is also their job to make sure that there are, for the EPOC, to make sure that there are training records that prove that people are qualified to work with the stuff. So the job of the EPM and EPOC is more admin, making sure people are trained and oversee to make sure we're not illegally dumping sharps and bloody stuff. Now for the specific employees handling RMWs, so there's the corpsman that's taking all the linen out, that are taking all the nasty gross stuff, that are taking the bio bins out. Their job is to make sure that the RMW is properly segregated. So you're not throwing a bunch of trash in your red bins, you're not throwing a bunch of red bin stuff in your general trash bins. And the segregation is supposed to start at the point of generation, which makes sense. Like, it's easier to separate needles from sharps from other stuff, as opposed to having this giant nasty cart full of sharps and whatever else, and then trying to sort it out later. So at the point of generation, I like to think of, remember in core school, sharp, 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 it's over my head, immediately putting it away. So at generation. It is their job to attend environmental training upon arriving to their duty station, and have annual training again. So almost everybody has annual training, but there's one person here that doesn't, and I'll touch that in a minute. They also need to report any spillings or leakages of RMW to the EPM or the EPOC. That makes sense, because if I'm working in environmental stuff and like my cart throws into a river and I just dumped a bunch of discarded fetuses and stuff into the local river, I should probably report that, because that's not going to end well for me if I don't. Then the next section of this instruction is action. So containers, it needs to be really obviously a hazmat container. So anything that's clearly marked with the universal biohazard symbol, labeled with the word biohazard, and red in color. Chemo are in a different container. So just know that I think it's yellow. It looks a little different, but chemo is a little bit different. Red containers cannot be used to collect anything other than RMW, which makes sense because you don't want to confuse it with anything. You don't want to accidentally stick your hand in a red container. So just the only red container in the entire facility are the bio bins. Let's see. There are specific types of bags that need to be used. I think I've seen these before, and I don't think I've ever gotten it right. So this is something I need to study a little bit better. So it's called the 165-gram Impact Strength American Society for Testing and Materials. Whew, that's a mouthful. So 165 grams. There's also a serial number after that. So 165 grams, ASTM Delta 1709 TAC 1. I can't think of a single way to make that easier to remember, so I'm probably going to look at that a bunch of times and really hope my passive memory kicks in when I'm taking the exam. So that's the first one, 165 gram at D1709 TAC 01. And the second one is 480 grams tear strength, ASTM 1922 TAC 00A. Both of these need to be either red or orange and have the bio symbol on the outside. It does caveat that in areas where RMW is rarely generated, such as very small labs or clinics, personnel may use red bags per reference A, which may or may not meet the standards. However, they still have to be properly marked. I would say it's probably highly unlikely that my level I would ever have to make that distinction. It's probably going to be coming from the department head side, but something to be aware of you don't have to, but you have to have guidance from somebody up high that you are indeed considered a small lab or small facility. I would not arbitrarily consider my facility small until one of the O's tell me otherwise. So a lot of the RMW stuff for the containers is pretty common sense stuff. So must be closed when not in use. Don't want a little kid or something falling into a bio bin. Full vials of vaccine or nasal mist vaccine dispensers should be returned through the reverse distribution program managed by the pharmacy. So I think about that as like the med take back. Because vaccines are created from viruses, they are usually considered RMW anyways, but let the pharmacy do their job. So if you have extra vaccine stuff, give it back to the pharmacy. Here's that empty 3%. So empty, qualified as less than 3% vaccine vials and vaccines, must be placed in a Sharps container, even if the vaccine has previously considered something called thimerosal. I have no idea what thimerosal is. I'll have to give that a Google later. So pathological waste needs to be in a rigid RMW container. I like to think of like the pickle jars or the test tube stuff. It needs to be in some sort of hard container. And then inside that container needs to be an RMW bag that should be labeled appropriately. Pathological waste may also be double bagged. So if you think pathological waste must be immediately refrigerated upon generation. So if you think of like just rotting parts of body, it makes sense that they should be refrigerated or frozen unless you're going to be smelling some really bad stank. So if the waste is maintained longer than 24 hours, it needs to be frozen. And I think the timeline for the frozen will show up later in the instruction. Off the top of my head, I think it's like 70 calendar days, but we'll touch that one in a minute. Extracted teeth are not considered pathological waste. Extracted teeth with amalgam are considered dual waste because they are hazardous waste and potentially infectious waste. The hazardous waste is the amalgam, and the potentially infectious waste is the extracted tooth. Extracted teeth without amalgam are to be placed in compliant RMW bags for disposal. And it says rinse off the teeth first because you don't want a bunch of grody blood and stuff on it before you do that. Most states allow dentists to return teeth to the patient upon request. Just rinse it off first. There are some situations where someone can take a placenta home. There's a couple caveats to that. If the provider believes that that placenta needs examination, they're not going to let the patient take it home. So if there's any like autopsy type stuff or any testing they got to do, they're going to do it and not just give the placenta away. If the patient has a communicable disease, so I'm not going to give someone it's going to sound kind of gross, but a placenta water balloon basically full of AIDS. I'm not just going to give that to somebody to do whatever they want. Upon receipt, the patient or the designee must immediately remove the placenta from the facility in an approved container, such as a cooler. So get it out of my hospital immediately. The facility is not going to store the placenta at all. If it stays with us, we're getting rid of it. And it cannot be returned to the hospital. So no take-backsies whatsoever. If we give away a placenta, I'm not taking it back. Bulk blood. So now I'm going to start going over how the disposal for a lot of stuff. For a lot of it, it's pretty much the same, like burning, incinerate, grinding. A couple of things are a little different. So blood and blood products, bulk blood may be disposed via sanitary sewer. But that's completely governed by state, FGS, OEBGS, depends on what they think is cool. Sharps need to be discarded immediately after use. Contact the EPM if there are still contents in a syringe. Ensure that large standing sharps containers are securely fashioned and placed on the floor so they can't be tipped over. So I don't want to accidentally kick over a bunch of needles. Let's see. Large sharp containers and sharp containers that are used without a designated fill line must be secured and removed when full. Don't overfill sharps container. Again, if I'm trying to like stick my hand and jam sharps down, I'm going to get stabbed a lot. It's going to be painful. It's going to be gross. And yeah, I'm going to get some nasties in me. Dental procedure carpules that are broken or contain visible blood will be discarded in sharps containers. Animal waste, again, if it comes from an animal, it's not automatically considered animal waste. So keep that in mind. Don't automatically think any animal is number 5. The only time it is a number 5 animal waste is when the animal has been infected with something, exposed to something, or is a test animal. Any other normal animals will just be pathological or whatever other type of waste it is. For most of these, it would be considered pathological waste. See. So, carcasses from non-contaminated animals that died, including vehicular impact and euthanasia, are typically not considered pathological waste. So, ISO waste, again, specifically biosafety level 4. Contact the facility infection control directives or the infection control officer on handling isolation waste. So before I'm starting to touch all the ISO stuff, let me ask someone that knows what they're doing, because I don't just want to be handling nasty BSL-4 ISO stuff and do a second COVID. Never again. Oh, I miss eating indoors. Other. This one, it really depends on what the local authority says. Some of the examples that includes is number 8. Again, this depends on what the state or the host nation says. So such as semen, vaginal secretions, CSF, synovial fluid, pleural fluid, peritoneal fluid, pericardial fluid, and amniotic fluid. These designated fluids would be RMW when free-flowing, dripping, or saturated on substrates. But again, that's one of those where I would defer to the EPOC, EPM. Hey man, what do I do with this stuff? So for group 9, chemotherapy, do not mix chemo trace waste with non-chemotherapy RMW or HW. So keep them separate. Oh yeah, here you go. It says yellow. Place chemo trace waste in yellow sharps-like containers. And that's it for the incineration, or how to dispose of this stuff. On to transport. So minimize exposure to RMW. Duh. Want to touch it as least as possible. I was wrong when I said 7 days earlier for frozen. Pathological waste must be refrigerated immediately and frozen if it remains on site longer than 24 hours. If frozen, pathological waste may remain on storage site for up to 30 calendar days. So specifically 30 calendar days. If you're thinking about how long something is freezing, it would never be business days. It is calendar days, 30 of them. Just remember, 30 calendar days is how long something can be frozen. That's pathological waste. Non-pathological, non-sharps container, collect in workspaces. So if it becomes gross, putrid, if it stinks, you can go ahead and take it out. You're not stuck to the 30 days. If it's looking, smelling grody, take that out immediately. You don't need to wait just because you technically have a few more days with it. Yeah. Here's where I got the 7 calendar days from. Non-pathological, so specifically non-pathological waste, can be placed unrefrigerated in final storage for up to 7 calendar days, which makes sense because that's not all the meat, so it's mostly a bunch of sharps and needles and stuff. I'd imagine at about 7 days of refrigerated probably smell really, really bad. But if it's not pathological, it can sit for 7 calendar days. So pathological waste needs to be refrigerated immediately, and you can freeze it for 30 days. But non-pathological waste can be stored for 7 days and just room temp, non-frozen. Let's see. For dating your RMW container, it needs to be labeled with the date that the first bag was placed inside, which makes sense because like either that 7-day or that 30-day countdown, it's going to start with the first item placed in it. So just think first in, first in, all out. I guess it's not LIFO or FIFO. We'll talk more about that in supply. But the first one in is what designates how long and when that clock starts. So for the bio signage for the RMW storage, you have to be able to see the biohazard sign within 5 feet. So think COVID 6 feet minus 1 is 5. 5 feet away, where L is 5 for the animal signs. I don't know, signs of animals. 5 feet. Stay 5 feet away, or you must be able to see it from 5 feet away. So for transport, you can't transport the waste over public roadways unless it complies with the local requirements. So in general, don't take stuff on the freeway, especially if you're carrying needles. Offsite transport is generally done by a bunch of contractors. It even says in here, public roadways offsite treatment disposal is typically moved by an RMW disposal contractor. And the RMW is disposed through destruction. So there's not a lab of just a bunch of dirty needles. It is destroyed. See, again, blood products can go through a sanitary sewer. And I have another fun number. Yay. For those of you that like advancement, numbers are fun, right? I've had to memorize a lot of weird numbers. So here is how you're supposed to steam sterilize equipment. So steam sterilization requires temperatures of at least 121 degrees Celsius, 250 Fahrenheit, for at least 90 minutes at 15 psi. So 121/250 Celsius first, then Fahrenheit. 90 minutes at 15 minutes, or 90 minutes at 15 psi. So again, with the feeling, 121 degrees Celsius, 250 degrees Fahrenheit, 90 minutes, 15 psi. And there's also supposed to be these weekly spore strips, Geobacillus styrothermophilus, close enough. That is the type of spore strip they use weekly. So again, the spore strip is Geobacillus styrothermophilus. Training. So job-specific training must occur prior to beginning the work and annually thereafter. So those annually trainings as well as the initial how to dispose of stuff. See. So people who are packaging RMW for offsite transport, they need to be trained as soon as possible, but the hard deadline is within 90 days. And that must be refreshed every 24 months. So specifically people that are taking the RMW for offsite transport or also signing the shipping documents, they need to be trained within 90 days and then every other year after that. So this is the one that's not every year, and that's the people that are taking it away 24 months as well as within the first 90 days. Let's see. And if there's any issues with training and getting stuff set up, contact your EPM at the Echelon 3 level, which I'm pretty sure is the region level. Medical waste plan. So the plan is reviewed annually. So the CO is supposed to review your the facility's bio waste every single year. But if there's going to be any significant change, or if so, yeah, major tongue-tied again, a long week. So if there's any major changes, or any changes at all, it needs to happen within 90 days of that annual review, as well as if there's any significant process change. So if I make a big change, I need to update the instruction. If there's any changes whatsoever, it needs to happen 90 days of the annual review, which annually is pretty often. Let's see. All training records must be retained for 3 years from the date of training. So we have 1 year for the EPOC EPM, 2 years for employees that are moving the stuff off site, but all those records need to be retained for 3 years. And there also needs to be documented proof that the RMW has been disposed of correctly. That's supposed to happen within 30 days or 60 days. In the event that the documentation is not received within 60 days, the EPM must notify contracting. So which makes sense. We don't just give our RMW to people and expect them to do the right thing with it. We need proof within 60 days. And if it's not within 60 days, the EPM is going to notify that contract boss. The records must be maintained with the original shipping documents and manifest by the facility for at least 2 years after the waste was accepted. So 2 years from the date that they accepted it, I have that paperwork on file. So that's me, CYA, if that company gets investigated, if anything's going on. I have a 2-year grace period where I can go back and be like, nope, they told us it was all good. This is the signed documents. And it's my, yep, I did my thing. They said they were going to do it, and they signed for it. And on the very last page of the instruction is a little flowchart for how to get rid of teeth. I don't think that's super important. Give it a read. A lot of it is dual waste, is anything with amalgam in it. To me, that was the big one that I saw. But because I think it is super important, I am going to pull up my acronym for my 9 types of RMW. Because I think if there is nothing else I get out of this instruction aside from how long something should be frozen, refrigerated, it's what are the 9 different groups. And again, because it's a multiple choice, if I remember like half of these, I can probably do the process of elimination. The more the better, but when you're playing the Navy advancement game, sometimes it's better just to take the L and make the best guess. So if you only remember half of these, you're going to be farther ahead than most other people, because you're not trying to get a 100% score. You're just trying to do better than most people. So again, I got the most culture, so I'm number 1. 2 POF, so 2 pathological waste. 2, I'm still getting used to the orientation. Blood, 2 vowels. 3, 2 vowels. 4 is use sharps, which ties into the 47. 5, animal waste, but only BSL-4, only contaminate, or not, BSL-4 is isolation, but only gross animals are number 5. Number 6 is that Isixoleces, so isolation. 7, second part of the 47, unused sharps. 8, the Donner Party ate each other, so 8 other. 9, old people get chemo, so chemotherapy trace waste is number 9. That's a really weird way of doing my hands, but I'm eventually going to get used to getting set up for doing YouTube stuff. I had a bunch of subscribers this week, so I really appreciate those who followed me. Let me pull it up real quick, and I will give you 2 a shout out. Aaron and Sophia, thank you both so much for following. I saw a lot of other people follow too, but I can only see the subscribers that have their account set to public. So thank you to the other people that are quietly subscribing. Let me know if there's any way I can do better. I think this weekend I'm going to try to get some video editing stuff, but honestly, I didn't start studying until my profile sheet came out. I'm already behind the curve. So that time that I could be spent learning how to video edit should be spent studying. So it's going to be. So after this exam, I'll try to find a way to make a little bit better videos. Maybe I'll add cool sound effects and Michael Bay explosions in the back. But again, thanks for enjoying my video. Hope you got something out of it. Please give me a subscribe, like, share, so I can make $1 million become a YouTuber. Awesome. Thank you.